My name is Elise, and this is our modern slavery and food presentation. Where does your food come from? First, we'll go over sustainability. And according to the 2005 World Summit Outcome, this sustainability has three different aspects, and that's economic development, social development, and environmental protection. And of course, sustainability is an intersectional issue, so you can't just kind of pick and choose one of these pillars because they all have to kind of work together in order to be sustainable and take account all aspects. So social sustainability may include humanitarian efforts and workers' rights. Economic sustainability might have something to do with finance and personal affordability, and environmental, maybe scarcity, waste management, and energy usage. So what is modern slavery? According to the International Labor Organization, report from 2016, it is work or service which is exacted from any person under the threat of a penalty for which the person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily. So these three are the main modes of modern slavery today, and that's sex trafficking, forced labor, and forced marriages. And those are just kind of some numbers on how many people are in those modes of modern slavery. So why is this important? Currently, there are 40.3 million people in modern slavery, and that means 1 in 200 people are slaves. And 1 in 4 victims of modern slavery are children. So that's around 10 million children right now in modern slavery. And again, modern slavery is it's an intersectional issue because a large majority of people in modern slavery are women and girls because of their vulnerability in their cultures and in those developing countries. Why is this still happening today? And mainly the big reason for this is just need of income to provide for either oneself or for one's family. Of course, corporations make a lot more money if they take advantage of cheap labor. And a lot of the times, this is able to happen because, those people in those industries have a difficult time being able to unionize because they may just not have the backing of their local government or even of their own country, because that industry may be something that the country exports and makes a lot of money out of. And for the United States, for example, in any given day, there can be an estimated 400,000 people living in modern slavery. And those two main forms here in this country is that of sex trafficking and forced labor in the agricultural industry. So in this country, it's a $150 billion a year industry. And, that happens because employers take advantage of migrants coming in, whether legally or illegally, and are just kind of taken advantage of because they are in this unfamiliar situation, but just need to be able to provide for either themselves or their family. Another reason this is still happening is because companies are not required by law to trace and inspect their products down their supply chain. So in doing so, this kind of leaves a lot of room for exploitation of the laborers and just kind of corruption in the company. You see here, companies like Nestle and Mars, they're only really able to source 24% to 49% of all their cocoa back to their global farms. That's a lot of people that are unaccounted for, and a lot of sourcing that's unaccounted for. You don't really know. Those companies don't even know whether or not their products are being sourced ethically, or if their laborers are being treated fairly. A lot of what they keep up with is maybe their production here in this country, but not a lot of things that they outsource. And currently, right now, there are more people in slavery today than any other time in history. And that's just kind of a crazy thing if you think about it. So this goes into agricultural labor in the United States itself. And in this country, farm workers are one of the most oppressed workers. This is because, migrants come in and they're often unfamiliar So it comes to a point sometimes where they rely on their employers for food, shelter, income, of course, is what they came here for. But there are a lot of ways that they can keep them there against their will. Um, as you can see here on the right side, these are like incidences that have happened here in this country. And oftentimes, what happens is when people come here legally, employers will immediately take away their passports or visas in order to scare their workers from leaving in fear of being deported back, or losing that form of income to support themselves or their family, albeit very small. Um, another example is when 400 Thai workers were legally lured into the country under this visa program. But what ended up happening is after their passports were taken away from them, they had to endure these terrible working conditions. And there was nothing they could do about it because they were in a new country, with no documentation. And that's just a really unfamiliar situation for anyone that would be in that situation. Um, and then sometimes employers like to incur debts, whether that is recruiting them, or maybe giving them a place to stay, or transportation, or food, or shelter. In that way, the workers are unable to leave because of the debts that they have from their to their employers. So as you can see, there's just kind of a lot of loopholes that employers can go through because of the system, and it's just something that's kind of hard to get around, but it is important to be aware of the situation in the first place and kind of know that there are things that you can do to kind of spread awareness and just kind of address the issue as a student right now. So first thing we can do, watching this presentation is already something that's, you're already doing something to kind of address the issue because you're educating yourself about it. I think education is really important because, people will not advocate for things if they don't know that there's a problem to begin with. So that's why I think educating yourself just about some specific topic that you may be really passionate about or maybe don't know much about, and sharing that with your friends is a really good place to start, as a student. And something even I'm working on is kind of being more confident in myself when I'm talking about these things. So for sure, kind of knowing your information and knowing where, just being sure of yourself will definitely help when it comes to kind of addressing these issues or bringing them up with people you may know. Other things you can do is, you can volunteer at a local anti-trafficking organization. You can be a more conscious consumer. So just kind of do your research and know what is the likelihood that modern slavery happened in the supply chain of this product or produce that I'm buying. I'm sure you know that chocolate, there's a lot of child labor that goes into that. So that's something, buying fair trade, anything with the fair trade logo, you will know that their products were sourced ethically and that their workers were treated ethically and paid a living wage. And that's important to just kind of look for that. And there are different ways you can do that. Of course, another thing you can do is vote, because as much as we try to do as individuals, these large corporations still have a lot of power over not kind of sourcing and tracing down their supply chain and understanding and knowing where they're not being accountable for it, and there are laws that allow these acts to still happen today. So I do think voting is really important. You can either write letters to companies and government officials to let them know that someone is paying attention and that you as the customer is paying attention, and that it is important to you to know where your food comes from and how those people are being treated down the supply chain. Another thing you can do is, of course, just go to local markets and farmers markets, because that way you know that your food was sourced locally. And so, of course, the likelihood that modern slavery played a role in that. Kind of it goes down by a lot. Um, so, but of course, this isn't always the most accessible option for everyone. People may live in dorms and may not even be in town, don't have cars. So one thing you can do is, you check your stickers on your produce to kind of check how far that they've traveled, because in that way you kind of check to see, I guess you can take into account the CO2 emissions that that food has kind of used to travel that far, because a lot of people expect produce to be around annually, but of course that is not always the case. So shopping seasonally is also another thing you can do. um, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do as a student. It doesn't have to be very big, but the just educating people about it is one of the first things you can do. And this would be the presentation, or this would be the activity you do if you are part of the education committee, to students in the dorms. They scan this QR code, it takes them to a website that asks them questions about what they eat, what they wear, their jewelry, and it kind of just estimates how many slaves work for that way of life. Because slavery does touch so many aspects of our life. And I think just being aware of the problem in the first place is really important. Um, and that, of course, at the bottom is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If that were to come up, I hope it does not. Um, and then these are the sources.